Hello and welcome to episode number 194, where I'm chatting with Joe and Victor about how attachment is so important for our survival and how we adapt our behavior when our attachment needs are not met, which can result in the suppression of the authentic self, our true nature, and which can manifest in disease physically and mentally. So please stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. I'm your host Colette, and I hope to educate and empower you to take charge of your health and well-being, preventing disease in the body and mind so that you can thrive in life. I will be sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. I will also discuss topics like yoga, which is the sister science of Ayurveda, health and wellness, nutrition, fitness, and mindfulness practices, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to help you to connect to each other. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend that you start by listening to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. Now, if you like the content, please subscribe to the show so the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. I've also set up a new private community away from social media on my new website, Elements Healing and Wellbeing. Now, this community provides a safe space for like-minded people to come together, to connect, to share, and to support each other. And I have many other perks in this community as well, so check it out. I'll put the link in the show notes or visit my website, elementshealingandwellbeing.com, and just click on the community tab in the menu. I hope you can join us. I'm looking forward to a lot more in-depth connection and conversation over there. And now, here's the show. Hello and welcome back to the Elements of Ayurveda podcast. I am here again with Victor and Joe.
Hello.
Hey, good morning, everybody.
So we're here together doing another podcast episode, and just to introduce you to Joe and Victor, in case you missed our trilogy of conversations a few weeks back, Joe is the founder of the Center for Applied Consciousness and a Kundalini Yoga teacher of over 2 decades. And Victor works with Joe here at the Center for Applied Consciousness and is the Ayurvedic Doctor. And so today we want to talk about attachment and authenticity and the balance between attachment and authenticity. Are you guys ready?
Well, I'm ready.
I'm ready.
Okay, so let's do this. So I guess first of all, I'd like to ask maybe Joe to explain why is attachment important in our lives?
Well, it's critical. It's absolute. When you're first born, it's 100% attachment. You have to attach to the mother, and you have to get the mother to attach to you. It's a two-way street there. That's why the baby learns a lot of nonverbal cues with its cuteness, its ability to use eyes and a smile and all that to get the mother to bring the tit to its mouth so that it can literally survive. It seems primal and everything, but that is the animal in us, and that is where we are at the beginning. So it is absolutely 100% necessary for attachment. So as we unfold this conversation, I don't want to give anybody the impression that attachment throughout life is ever a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because too often attachment is associated with codependency. And for some reason, codependency has gotten a negative rap in our culture. But we can address that as we go along too, this whole idea of codependency. And I'll bring up some references on that. But for now, let's just say that attachment is absolutely fundamentally necessary for our survival. And it has to happen. It has to happen both ways.
Right.
The mother has to attach to the baby too.
Yeah.
Because how often have we heard stories of a baby being left in a dumpster or the mother didn't attach?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
or the
absolutely.
geese. Everybody uses that. The geese, if the mother doesn't attach them, right?
Yes.
The babies will attach to a human being. Right.
Right. Yeah. And that's it. Throughout the animal kingdom, we see that attachment, and humans attach for longer, which is really interesting.
The longest.
The longest, right?
The longest.
Yeah.
We're the most attached.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is really interesting. So obviously really important for survival. And so if we have experiences where our needs are not met, that attachment is not made, right? If there's some trauma, and it doesn't necessarily even have to be trauma. It could be a mother that's disengaged, right?
Sure.
That is trauma.
Yeah.
That defines trauma.
Right. Yeah.
Not
yes.
inability to attach.
Right. Exactly. So when I say trauma, some people might think, oh, a big, a crash, an accident, something huge. An event, exactly. Yeah. But it could be something as an emotionally detached mother or father or so on. So what happens, Victor, when our needs for attachment are not met, in particular in the autonomic nervous system?
A few things can happen in the autonomic nervous system. So let's take a very young child or a baby where it's 100% attachment. That is a absolute necessity. There's famous studies shown that, if you take newborns and terrible study, but if you leave them isolated, they can die. I mean, literally. So the nervous system goes haywire, and basically they'll go into their sympathetic state and get highly stressed for long periods of time. And their bodily functions won't develop properly. And then if it's bad enough, if it's severe enough, then they'll immobilize and actually their metabolism will shut down and they can die. So it's not a option, it's a necessity.
Right.
And that's why detachment at the early phases can create a traumatic or a traumatized baby child.
Yeah. Oh, wow. It's such a huge impact. And so that's an extreme case. But let's take an example, maybe Joe, you could answer this, of a case where a child is growing up in an abusive home or a home where there's a lot of anger. And so that can affect there's still some attachment there, but it can affect it. What happens in that case? Because obviously the child is trying to navigate these emotions.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't even take such an extreme. I mean, we like to look at extremes because they're black and white.
Right. Which is good to kind of, to lay the land. But then you have the scale in between of.
Well, let's just remember Brené Brown says that disengagement is the worst of all betrayals.
Yeah.
All betrayal.
Yeah.
Disengagement. So if let's just say that we kind of focus on the mother because she's that primary giver at first. So let's just say her and dad, and they're in a wonderful marriage now. Everything's fine, but they have a really bad argument. Something happens in their life, a car accident or something, and it leads to a really bad argument. And the mother's way of handling that stress is to disengage.
Right.
They may not even get into a lot of verbal confrontation. The child may not even hear the argument.
Yeah.
Maybe it wasn't much of one because she goes to silence.
Yeah.
And the husband just shuts up, right? And he just leaves. Let's just say he walks out and cuts the grass.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to portray this couple as not a very not normal couple.
Yeah, right? Not dramatic.
Not dramatic at all.
Yeah.
But the mother emotionally disengages. The child feels that disengagement. And what does the child do with that? I'm the reason she's disengaging.
Right.
The child doesn't, I say he because I'm he. Yeah. The child doesn't, it's probably my childhood and I don't realize it. The child doesn't know that they're having a problem. The child feels the disengagement from the mother and says, my way of securing the mother's affections isn't working.
Right.
I'm not doing something right.
Right, exactly.
So the child blames the self. And now you're into a whole cascading effect, and I'll let Victor talk about that with the vagus nerve. And now the disengagement, remember, again, I keep saying this over and over, it's the worst.
Yeah. It's
the worst thing we can do. So I know, in my time, because I'm older than you guys, there was a philosophy that if a child was crying in the crib, now I'm not talking about a 5-year-old, I'm talking about a crib child, that young, you just leave it alone until it stops crying.
Yeah.
Well, that's disengagement.
Yes.
And that's the worst of all betrayals.
Yeah.
All right, Victor, vagus nerve.
Vagus nerve,
Ayurveda.
autonomic nervous system, Ayurveda. So, so there's some really important stuff in there, which is the child. So we all have a prakriti. We had the episode on that, right?
Yeah.
this prakriti is nature's authentic formation for our physiology. And I hope by now people who've listened to all our stuff are not separating the mind from the physiology. So it's an authentic expression of the persona too via the mind. And what happens is the child, as Joe said, it says, okay, and obviously they're not saying this like an adult would say it in their head, but they're feeling all this. They're feeling my ways of bonding or attaching are not working. I need to adapt. I need to change my strategy in order to get the attachment back. And they do. They have to. It's required. It's not an option. So they're, in a way, fighting for their survival. So then they do whatever they can do that they see works. And they may, in the child's inner world, they may be trying a bunch of different things. The parents may not just notice that the child's doing this, but they're trying all these different things to get the attachment back. And a lot of those things fail. And maybe they get punished or criticized for making these attempts or acting out, quote unquote, right? But these are all attempts to reattach. Then maybe they find something that actually does the job. Well, that's an adaptation of prakriti. Now, we don't want to call that bad because it's inevitable. It's just part of the human story. So, but it's going to happen, and it's going to create the very, very, very seedlings of a pathology. The very beginning. In some cases, that can grow very fast. If it's dramatic enough. But in most people, it creates the very beginnings of their adapted self, which is a step away from prakriti. And then that begins a samprapti Ayurvedic terminology for pathology. So if you get, like, for example, an abusive household, right, where the child has to adapt quite a lot, right? They have to step far away from their prakriti in order to pacify or deal with the abuse in some way. Then obviously you're going to get a bigger schism and a bigger imbalance. And that's all happening in the nervous system. It doesn't need to be the wrong food or the baby formula, or all that stuff matters too. But you could feed them all the Flintstones vitamins you want, and it's not going to make up for the fact that it's an abusive situation.
Very good. Thank you for that. So you mentioned our authentic self. And so let's talk about authenticity now and why that is important to us. And again, pretty like we did with attachment, going back to the very beginning, why it's important to our survival.
Okay, so this adaptation play. All right, so now we're adapting. And so if you look at Gabor Mate's work, he talks about adaptation. Most mental health illnesses that we call illnesses, he said, are not illnesses at all. That they're nothing but adaptations. And that includes all addictions. So he's saying, no, it's actually normal because adaptation is what survives you, correct? So if that's true and you, let's say, become addicted to food as an adaptation to the stress around you, and that survived you in your childhood, it was a good thing. Why are you calling it an illness, right? Okay, so now let's get back to your question. I just wanted to get that in the foundation there because we'll refer back to it now. As we adapt and as the attachment starts to break, as we start to age and we start to become aware of the I. I exist also. It's no longer just my parents and I'm attaching and trying to get what I need. But wait a second. I have something. I have a personality or an ego, and that ego now needs to come into existence, right? It needs to be expressed. But I'm adapting at the same time. Right? So is my adaptation taking me away from my true self? The expression of who I really am and who I want to bring forward into the world. And how do I even figure out what that is if I'm spending all my time adapting to all this stress around me? And no one's even talking to me about it. No one's even asking me how I feel. Right? I'm being told, verbally or non-verbally, how to feel because I'm using that to adapt. So if if I tell myself to feel a certain way because that's the best way to get the needed response from the mother,
Yeah.
I believe that that feeling is truly me, but it's not. It's an adaptation
Right.
to get the response I need from the mother. So now if the mother doesn't come to me and say, how do you feel really? Don't worry about getting what you need from me. How do you feel? What is it you wanted to express? Your dad has you out playing baseball, but maybe you want to be learning how to play the piano.
Right. Right.
But it'd be better in an adaptation in this family if you learn to be a jock rather than a sensitive music kid.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So you are out playing baseball. But inside of you, there's just every time you walk past a piano or you hear a piano,
right.
Right?
Right.
You get this little like, oh,
Yeah.
I wish I could be doing that, but my dad will think I'm a sissy
Right.
or less of a boy.
Right. Right.
So I go there. And why? Because that adaptation is an advantage to our survival.
Yeah.
Because that keeps dad providing for us. Because now we're old enough, if we've gone past the age of that infant, we're old enough now that we recognize we need a house and clothes. And if dad is the breadwinner, which was more traditional in my lifetime, then I'm into keeping dad pleased with me. So I'm into adaptation.
Right.
So now as we age, we'll get to be 7, 8, 9. Are we going to finally say to dad, I don't want to play baseball. I want to take piano lessons.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, what happens?
Yeah.
Yeah, and from that young person's perspective, whether or not, and remember, it's all perceived with the autonomic nervous system, whether or not the dad's going to respond, the dad might say, great, and completely support that change. Maybe, right? From that child's perspective, it's unknown.
Right.
And so it's a survival question, right?
Right.
So the fear of death literally is on that child's shoulder. When they confront that family paradigm with, I don't want to play baseball, I want to play the piano.
Yeah.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And that fear of death that you brought up now, Victor, that's what Gabor Mate was talking about, that authenticity is literally our gut feeling. So when we had to survive in nature, it's that sense. We felt things. We felt the energy. We felt when we were in danger.
Right.
So that still rings true today, whether it's a bear in the bushes versus, confronting your father about wanting to do your passion.
Well, even taking the risk to ask the question, right? So here we go. You're setting up now a really clear choice of how you're going to live life. If I choose to never even ask the question, because the question is a risk.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to live a life of safety, comfortability, and those kind of things, then I don't even ask the question. I don't want to risk it.
Right.
If you're going to live life with more risk, adventure, and the erotic, and this is Esther Perel, she talks about this, so check this out, because this goes into your adult relationships now, you guys. So if I'm going to now everybody needs some degree of safety and predictability and comfort. That's kind of, if you think of that as the place you jump off of, you've got to have some of that to even be willing to risk. Yeah. Okay?
Yeah.
So if you're completely freaked out as a child, you will not bring up the piano. You may not even bring up baseball. You may just be right,
and you may not even know.
You may not,
because it may even be so cloaked with fear, or what you may not even realize that passion is dormant within you because of your experiences, perhaps. Right.
So if you're that bad, we're that down there. We need a therapist. We need help. Yeah. Okay. But let's say you're closer to normal, what we would call normal. Yeah. So you can hear both things. You can hear the baseball and the piano. Yeah. So now you're going to choose. How are you going to proceed with life? Are you going to take those risks? Are you going to be willing to take the adventures? Are you going to maintain the erotic in your life? And that question now requires some safety and some comfort and some predictability. So have we built that much into our life? We know that if we say to Dad, I'd rather play the piano than baseball, he's not going to kick us out of the house. Right. We're not going to lose life. We're past that. But he might just roll his eyes and mumble sissy and walk into the house. And you may get your piano lessons.
Yeah. But even dad rolling his eyes and calling you sissy and losing respect, that's
killer.
That's a killer.
That's
right?
a killer.
And the nervous system?
Yeah, and so what we gotta remember about that is that the autonomic nervous system does things based on past experience. That's what so encoded in us for our entire life, whether we like it or not, is that necessity of attachment feeling. Mm-hmm. So whether it's relevant in our moment-to-moment situation as a young adult or an adult, inside our autonomic nervous system is, I need to attach, I need to attach, I need to attach.
Right.
Because it's left over from the actual need to attach.
Yeah.
So we create ourselves as we go down this path. We help create our autonomic nervous system by taking risk when we make choices that are new. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So when that 9-year-old says, makes the decision inside, I'm scared, but I'm going to take the risk of asking for piano lessons.
Yeah.
Because I can temper my fear by knowing with my awareness that I'm not going to get kicked out of the house, even though my nervous system is like, you're going to die, right?
Right.
I know I'm not, so I'm going to temper that feeling, but I still feel it. And I'm going to take the risk and jump off of my safety platform and take the risk and maybe have a brand new experience that I've never had before. That actually, when I express my authentic self, it's accepted. Mm. And now that's encoded in my autonomic nervous system.
Right.
Or not.
Right.
And that is huge in our development. And we're faced with those choices every day.
Yeah, so it's a matter of, like you were saying as well, Joe, it's like, do we stay safe and a predictable life versus the risk-taking that's going to help us grow?
And what proportion of that, and you can talk about that.
No, go.
Yeah, what beneath any given moment is our basic framework of how much do I want to risk at all?
Yeah.
But that... And then we identify with that. We end up identifying with our nervous system pathways that are like, no, I'm just the kind of person who doesn't like to take any risks. That's not really true. Mm-hmm. That's what you've grown to become because of all these choices and circumstances. But to identify with that eliminates this possibility of actually creating a different autonomic reality for yourself.
Right. Absolutely. So what we've learned here is that basically the repression of the authentic self starts a pathology of disease.
Definitely.
Physically and mentally. Or mentally.
Definitely.
Okay. So if our disease was caused by our lack of attachment, which is a result of our adaptation, right, to our environment, then there is a possibility that we can realign that.
Absolutely.
Right. So the disease is caused because we have this adaptation that we made due to our experiences, say in our formative years.
Yes.
So now we're an adult.
We're an adult. Well, it's Ayurveda.
Yeah.
You have to put yourself back into balance.
Right.
Right. And so, but to do that, you have to become consciously aware.
Right.
So you have to recognize the trauma. Now we're using trauma. It's a very broad trauma here. It's not the hardcore trauma. I'm talking about the trauma of what we were saying. Let's say, Dad, we say to Dad, I want to play the piano, and we get the rolled eyes, and we get the nonverbal cues with a couple of little verbal cues on top, icing on the cake, and we're feeling pretty crappy, but at the same time, we go ahead and do it, and all this kind of stuff. And we overhear a conversation between the mother and father, how the fact that we have to pay for these piano lessons is creating a stress on the family. That makes you feel guilty, doesn't it? Oh, yeah. Okay, so, this all might blah, blah, but I would ask everyone listening to this, tell me that it's not true that this isn't playing out in your adult relationships, in your marriages, every day, right? And that's the sad part, is that, okay, but the way to break that pattern is that you can't do anything about the past. So just become conscious of it.
Yes.
Aware of it. Yeah. So that now if I'm talking to Colette, she's my wife, let's say, and I'm talking to her and I say, I really want to take piano lessons. Mm-hmm. And she goes, oh yeah, Sure, honey. Great. Okay. Come on. That was
not very
that.
enthusiastic.
Right. And then she says, well, I'll give up something I really love so we can afford it.
Oh, just put the knife in and turned it.
Yeah. Okay. So tell me that isn't the same thing as overhearing the parents go
Right.
on. Yeah, we want Johnny to take piano lessons. Well, I don't really care, but if you think he should, it's like the mother's like, yes, he really wants to. Well, it'll create hardship on his financial. Come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're having the same conversation.
It is, right? It's so true. And it is about that awareness, but the attachment to our authentic self is possible again, right? And like we're saying,
Yes.
this is the journey of Ayurveda and yoga. Can you talk a little bit on that, Victor, about how the environment caused the behavior, and therefore it's a matter of understanding our behavior to patterns in order to change, right? To how draw awareness to those old behavior patterns we learned in childhood. So that's the good news, really, because they were adaptations. So now we need to retrain our autonomic nervous system and create new pathways.
Yeah. So let's take a very Pitta dominant child. And the Pitta dominant child grows up in a household where the father's a rageaholic.
Yeah.
And so as a child, the major adaptation that very Pitta dominant child made, because at the time there's no way that child could take on that father.
Yeah.
Right? So the adaptation that child made was to suppress all his or her anger.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well that's definitely going to cause imbalance, especially for a Pitta. For a Pitta to suppress all their anger is going to cause major problems in the physiology.
Yeah.
Okay, so the kid grows up doing that and really developing those suppression mechanisms well.
Yeah.
Because there's so much anger coming up because of the Prakriti that they have to be very capable of suppressing it.
Yeah.
Okay, so it creates quite a dramatic imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
The kid finally comes to a moment in their, let's say, teenage years. Let's just pretend it's a boy, and realizes that, oh wait, I'm actually taller than my father now. And oh wait, my father's getting older, and actually, I don't think he could take me on anymore.
Right.
And whether it's true or not, let's say that the kid's developing this new perception of the self.
Yeah.
So this kid now is faced with a little bit of a new environmental reality and has a new set of choices in front of him. And one of those choices might be, well, I don't need to suppress my anger anymore. Now, I'm not, there could be all these things going on and explosions and overreactions. And that's not the point right now.
Yeah.
The point is, a new choice can be made that changes the autonomic nervous system experience, where instead of engaging in flight behavior, the child engages in fight behavior, right? And that's a very different response and can be a step towards the authentic self. I'm not saying that is the kid's authentic self. I'm saying a step towards the authentic self because the original adaptation has been broken.
Right.
Right.
So this is like a bit of a pendulum here with this teenager who's fired up, hormones are raging, right? There's a lot of heat and anger manifesting, probably, so on the skin and like heat.
Everywhere.
So the pendulum has swung fully back.
Swung.
Right.
And now you might get an explosion.
Yeah.
And now that might start to look almost like the kid's acting like the father.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that too. And so then as an adult, as the kid gets even older and gets in 20s and 30s, and has now learned another adaptation, which is I can control my environment through rage.
Yes.
Which is what the father did.
Yes.
Right? Now that's still not the authentic self. The autonomic nervous system is still creating a pathology.
Yeah.
Because now it's way, like you said, the pendulum's way on the other side.
Right.
So the journey to the authentic self would be away from even that adapted self, right? Yeah. And say, well, what's the reality of my prakriti as opposed to a reaction to my father?
Absolutely. So that is the question, right? How do we balance attachment and authenticity? How do we balance that? We understand, yes, this is the journey we go on through life. So people are listening to this and they're like, oh my goodness, I can see this playing out in my current life. Right. How do they begin with that? Awareness, we talked about.
Awareness. You have to sit down and then you got to look at the relationship honestly and say, where am I acting out certain behaviors, saying that this is my authentic self, when I'm deluding myself into believing that.
Right.
The truth is, I am doing this to stay attached to you.
Yeah.
Because I either perceive or it is true that if I change my behavior based on an awareness or a consciousness that, no, my authentic self is not to be angry, is not to act out in anger. Actually, what I would like to express to you is sadness.
Yeah.
But if I come to you with that and you just go and you just blow me off or run me over or whatever, where you wouldn't have done that if I'd have come at you with anger.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, but if my authentic self really does want to express itself that way, then that's an attachment issue. I'm still like saying, what's the best way to stay attached to Colette? You know, and if that's to be angry, I know this seems ridiculous now. I can see that. I mean, I see it myself.
Right.
Because I do this work on myself, right?
Yeah.
It may seem crazy but I may actually decide that the best way to stay attached to Colette is to bring anger to her rather than a gentler me going like, God, you know what I'd really like to express to you is sadness right now. I know, crazy, huh?
Yeah.
But that's the truth. And we also may stay addicted to a drug that we know is destroying us.
Yeah.
Because it gives us a certain level of predictability in our day.
Yeah.
Rather than kick the habit or going through the process of what it would take to get rid of that habit. It's the same thing.
Right.
So when you look at somebody, like if you're not drug addicted, you look at a heroin addict living on the street and you go, oh my God, how can that person make that choice every day to stay there? Because the reality looks horrible to you.
Yes.
It's compassion. You're not trying to criticize that person. Turn around and look at your own life and think, how many things am I doing contrary to my authentic self that veils the authentic self to my own awareness?
Right. Simply
because I may perceive that would ruin some kind of attachment that I feel is necessary for me for my survival. Now, survival may have shifted from physical survival to emotional survival.
Yeah.
So in a marriage, it's probably more of an emotional survival that I'm talking about. But if I don't want to give up that attachment, I may be perceiving a whole lot of things that I then act on that aren't necessarily even true. And actually the relationship would be better, just like our life would be better if we're not addicted to a drug. Our lives might be better if I actually stopped behaving in that certain way. Yeah. And brought my authentic self to you and said, here's who I really want to be in relationship to you. Right. You might actually enjoy that more. Right. And our relationship would get better. Yeah. But perception and my unwillingness to take the risk of change. Yes, exactly. Keeps me in what we're calling almost the pathology of a bad relationship. Right. Right. Crazy, and then leading to a health pathology as well. Yes. And again, some people might not even be aware of what they're doing, right? No, of course not. Most of the time not. It's all subconscious and unconscious. Yeah. All this stuff being played out in the subconscious and unconscious. Right. Yeah. And maybe times we get glimmers or we get a reflection from someone. Maybe intentionally they're giving us a reflection, or you just observe and it's like, whoa, that I felt that. And I don't even know why. But that is the autonomic nervous system informing you that you have I don't necessarily want to use the word trigger, but something's there pushing on something inside you. And you could use that as a point of reflection if you wanted to. Right. And we talked in the past episodes about the critical lovers, having critical lovers in your life and the importance of peeling back those layers. And again, with curiosity, not, and self-compassion, not beating yourself up. We all have stuff from our life. It's life, right? Nobody had the perfect life. We all have these adaptations. But in order to get to our authentic, true self, and if this is the journey of our lifetime to, bring our true selves into this world and to manifest that, there is a journey of going back and peeling back the layers. Right. And like we talked about with the critical lovers, to critical lovers, or Gabor Mate calls it compassionate inquiry, which I know on a professional level, like he's doing, is one thing, but I think we can all practice compassionate inquiry with each other.
Yeah.
And to what degree and how good you are at it, that's not the point. You know, if you really care and you're sitting at the kitchen table with a friend over a cup of tea in the morning and, you know, she's come over to your house because she needs somebody to talk to about her marriage or something, we can all practice some level of compassionate inquiry with one another. We can all open our hearts and talk to each other. And then, like you said, curiosity, and inquire from that place, like, hey, so what is going on? Not I want to dominate and tell you and control you and anything like that. Or, you know, you're wrong, I'm right, or there is a wrong and there is a right. Like, who said that?
Yeah.
You know, shaming and blaming. I told you 3 years ago.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to shame you and blame you because you didn't do what I said.
Yeah.
You know, that, and too often that's what we get from our parents, right? Even at older ages. Like, so we turn to our friends and everything. But if we could all practice a little bit more compassion inquiry and come with curiosity as the critical lover, I think we'd all be better off. And I certainly have been guilty of that in the past. And I'm taking this course with Gabor Mate, you know, and I'm learning that. If nothing else, I'm learning at least that much. To mellow out a little bit and bring the heart into the conversation.
Make it a softer conversation, more vulnerability, so it's more open to sharing. And can you talk to people a little bit about compassionate inquiry if they're not familiar with it? And also just to mention who Gabor Mate is.
Gabor Mate he's all over the YouTube, so I won't even go into it. Just click on and put in Gabor Mate into YouTube. There's like 40,000, and they're great.
Yes,
there's all kinds
it's really
of stuff.
worth checking out. It's Mate, Gabor Mate, two words, obviously.
And he's compassionate inquiry is his thing. That's his trademark. He is teaching that, and he practices that in his therapy. But his focus all these years is he's a physician turned psychologist, but his whole thing is with addiction. So that's what you're going to get. He's going to be talking a lot about dealing with addicts. You're going to have to pull the wisdom out of that and apply it to your own life.
Yes.
He has spent almost all his whole life dealing with severe addictions, not just mild addictions. And he's gone to some interesting places to try to find solutions for these things, which may or may not have anything to do with your life.
Absolutely. And Victor, can you talk a little bit about how you would use that in a setting, about even with a friend or a client, about how you would use compassionate inquiry?
I think that if someone like clinically is where I use some that type of thing the most, or am learning more and more how to use it better. But basically the inquiry as to what's even going on inside this person and not assuming that I know off the bat.
Right.
You know, because I might be able to read their pulses and I might be able to assess them and get some information from my perspective. But it's also important for the person to feel like they can open up and talk about at least who they feel like they are at that time. Yeah. Whether it's adapted or authentic or anything like that, right? So, but what I've noticed that is really powerful about this kind of thing, and in Ayurveda it's called prashna, which is the art of asking questions. And it's not simply just like ask one question after the other about blood pressure and stuff like that. It really truly is an art. What's been incredible to witness is how inevitably, if you open up the space for a person to talk and they talked about their symptoms or what they're experiencing, and then sometime later in the conversation, maybe not right after, they'll say, you know, and they'll bring up an event, or a few events, or a person, right? And you ask them to, this is what Gabor Mate does really well, where do you feel that in your body? And a lot of times that's hard for people. They'll say, you know, oh, you know, and they'll start describing something that has nothing to do with their body. Yeah. So you kind of push on that. And 95% of the time, if that conversation keeps going, you will be able to trace that feeling and its responses straight to their symptoms on a visceral level. And that's great. I mean, anyone listening to this who's an Ayurvedic practitioner knows that those things are all connected. The important part is they connect it. Yes. They make the connection. Yes. And then that creates a big opening for suggestion on change. Right. Whereas before, you're just going to get a defense mechanism. Right.
shining the light on the root of the issue. And again, I'm a big believer in you don't have to go through the whole trauma of whatever you experienced or whatever you adapted to in your early childhood. But even shining a light in that root can have a huge opening effect and a start to healing.
Yeah, and it's amazing that the twists and turns that the nervous system makes in a feeling state to get to the final symptom.
Right.
I mean, it goes up and down and left and right, and from the chest to the left side to the right side to the eyes, and then all of a sudden you got a rash. And
right.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
But that's why it's so confusing a lot of times, because we're all tangled up.
Right. So basically, essentially, the dis-ease in our body, whether it's physical or mental, becomes our greatest teacher in our healing process.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
If you allow it to be your teacher.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It can
That's the trick.
Yeah.
Well, it can be the soul. It's the lotus metaphor, right?
Yeah.
It's the lotus blossoms this beautiful flower if it can take the muck from underneath and use it as nourishment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the important issue there is to not start self-judging. If you can stay away from self-judgment,
Yeah.
I think you can start to use the muck, because you see it as everything's good. The muck is good too.
Right.
It's full of nourishment and water. There's some water in it. It's all good for that plant. But if you start getting into judgment and you start blaming and shaming, and you look at that muck and go, why wasn't that muck nicer muck?
I want better muck.
I want better muck.
Right.
Then you're going to get stuck in the muck.
Yeah, exactly. It's a downward spiral. Whereas, again, it's looking at it through curiosity and the possibilities, and of going through this journey and seeing the roots and being like, wow, and just the curiosity of how it ended up in a rash, like you said, Victor, or and then starting on that journey. Yes. It's so important.
Or the rash metaphor, the behavior that you're destroying a relationship because you think that behavior is actually going to preserve that relationship.
Yeah.
But you don't talk about it enough. You don't get to the root, as you're saying.
Right.
So you repeat these behaviors. It seems, if you go to a counselor or you get to it, you're going to look at yourself and go, Jesus, what am I, crazy?
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's how it feels in the moment when you realize the muck was the source of life for you. And the whole time you spent criticizing it because yuck, it's mucky, it's dirty, it's crappy looking.
Yeah.
But yet it was the source of your very life.
Right.
And that is how mentally we get confused too. So it's the same as the rash. It is not a straight line.
Yeah.
So when you start to unwind this stuff, when you start to unwind your consciousness back to trying to connect it to that early trauma, as we're calling it very lightly now, very light trauma, like the parents had an argument trauma, it is not a straight line.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to get over.
Yeah.
It's tricky as hell.
It is. And it just shows how in those formative years that adaptation is laid down literally in our matrix.
Yes.
And has run so deep. So it's also not an easy fix.
Yes.
And this again, where you need support and critical lovers in your life, whether that be friends or a therapist or practitioners. Yeah.
Anybody who's willing to talk to you.
Yeah, I think the tension between the expression of our authenticity and the need for survival is the main tension that is at play in all this. But that it's like the famous Gautama Buddha middle way thing, right?
Yeah.
If you tie the string too tight, then it's going to snap. If you don't tie it enough, then the instrument doesn't play. And so that tension is necessary.
Yeah.
And we got to stop looking at it as a bad thing, because if we do, then we start self-criticizing, because it's in our nervous system.
Yes.
So we're going to start criticizing ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's very tamasic. It could
Very
either be
tamasic
or rajasic, depending on the tendencies, right?
Yeah, the expression of it, how we go about it.
Yeah, these guys, Gabor Mate and this teacher who does the diamond method, they actually go so far as to say, quit trying to avoid suffering.
Yeah.
Actually take the suffering in and realize it is a positive thing in your life and learn what lesson has to be learned from that suffering.
Right.
Quit trying to avoid it.
Right. It's the path to consciousness, right? It's a path to self-realization.
Yeah. And that it's a gift.
Yeah.
That all suffering is a gift.
Yeah.
But of course it sucks when we're going through it.
Right.
But if we can keep that attitude of like, okay, but what am I supposed to be learning from this suffering? Not what do I do next to avoid this suffering?
Yeah.
Right. Like, because that gets you back to that adaptation mindset again, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I wanted to avoid suffering. And so now we may pick up an addiction there.
Yeah.
That'll avoid your suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Temporarily.
Yeah.
Right. I have that. You have one too many beers. You may not feel much at all tonight.
Right.
Right. So that avoided the suffering.
Yeah.
But did you learn anything?
Right.
No.
And that will keep going until life stops you in your tracks, right? And a disease manifests.
We're all coming there. We all end up dead.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, with the addiction thing, because it's so prominent, because everyone has an addict inside or the capacity to addict, because addiction's just bonding gone wrong.
Yeah.
And the lack of connection is what really drives that addictive, or that lack of ability to attach drives that addictive desire or craving. But if we don't get in touch with our authentic selves to a certain extent, we end up with that feeling of emptiness or isolation, because if you're not giving someone a piece of your authenticity in any given communication, it doesn't matter what they do, you're not going to feel connected to.
Yeah.
You're only offering a facade.
Yeah.
So there's no way that inner core can feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
So it gets really, really important to maintain our autonomic behavior, which drives our habits, right? We like to think that we can control our ability to, engage in certain habits, but we just are wrong, because the autonomic nervous system will just throw a temper tantrum, basically, until we give in. And it will increase our suffering to the point where it's better to give in than exist in the state of that suffering.
Yeah.
That the salve to that is getting in touch with the authentic self, because it cools the autonomic nervous system so that it doesn't throw that temper tantrum, and then you can change behavior.
Yeah.
And the pivot point to that is, are you willing to take that risk or not?
There's always that moment.
There's that moment. And that is what you got to keep in mind. Are you going to take that risk and take a step away from comfort and into the adventure of your life?
Right.
And that's what Joseph Campbell that's what he means by saying, follow your bliss. You know, and he says it that way.
Yeah.
Follow your bliss. He doesn't mean go have 3 beers at the bar because that makes you happy.
Yes.
No, he's talking about bliss.
Yeah.
Finding the authentic self. And are you willing at pivot point to take the risk to start that journey versus staying in comfort and predictability? And again, I know we've already said this, and Victor can explain it by the ANS, is addiction to a drug is actually comfort. Mm-hmm. It is predictability.
Yeah.
It's safety. To an addict, that's safety. So don't be caught in thinking that you're risking because you bought a really big house and there's a big mortgage.
Right.
That's not what these guys are talking about. That's not risk.
The core risk is, if I put forth my authentic self, will my survival be, will I survive?
Yeah, will
that
I be
is the risk.
accepted?
So it's like, and the answer is always, I don't know. And that's why the fear is there. Yeah. So the risk is, I don't know what the consequence is going to be, but I'm going to express my authentic self and
see what happens.
See what happens. That's the risk, not buying a house or putting yourself in a highly stressful wig out state based on adaptation after adaptation after adaptation.
Right.
That's not risk.
That's not it.
Yeah.
Well, it's like, it goes back to the soul-driven life we talked about in the last episode together, whereas we're following our intuition versus our ego. And the misery of a life where we're not expressing our authentic self. True happiness comes when we're in our true nature and expressing our true self.
Right. That would be great. And there's just so many levels and so many layers, and you can keep going, but that's just philosophy, and I don't want to get lost in it because this is, I want to stick to the Ayurveda. But if anybody wants to read a great book about relationship and love and all that stuff, I'd say, but it's kind of out there, so you got to be ready for that. But it's called Love Unveiled by A.H. Almas, and he's the teacher of Gabor Mate, or one of his teachers, and he really gets into all this, and it's great. In the book, he even says, what's wrong with codependence? Why has the word codependence or dependence become a negative thing? Tell me where we're not codependent on one another.
Right.
And big issues, and we've got one right in our face, was COVID-19. And then let's take the environmental collapse that's going to be upon us pretty soon, right?
Yeah.
A guy burning coal in a chimney in Minnesota is affecting the lives of someone in China.
Yeah.
So you tell me how we're not codependent on one another.
Right.
And yet, how many times have you heard somebody say, well, I didn't want to do that because I didn't want to become codependent.
Yes.
And they have that fear in their voice and they're kind of shaking. So what does that really mean? What it really means is you don't want to lose your individuality.
Yes.
And you think that becoming codependent will cause you to have to sacrifice your individuality. But another way of saying individuality, the way we're saying that in this conversation, is the authentic self.
Right.
I don't want to lose my authentic self in order to attach to you. Right? So can I attach? Can I have the pleasure of attachment? We may call that marriage. Let's and yet remain in my authentic self.
Right.
Can we do that? And if we do, codependency is no longer a scary word, because yes, in attachment, you've become codependent.
Yeah.
But am I asking you to give up your authentic self to stay attached to me?
Right.
Or am I not? And how much are you bringing that in your mind is, I had to break that with my parents and I'll never do that again.
Yeah.
But now you're not giving that's not life. That's
right.
Like, wait a second, are you willing to take that risk with me that we're going to attach, become codependent, maybe financially, whatever, as a married couple? But neither one of us sacrifices our authentic self in that equation. In fact, it's encouraged and supported and brought forward. My relationship with you brings forward my authentic self. You encourage it.
That's the ideal.
That's what
partnership, right?
That's
is that there's
shooting.
Connection. You feel you have that solid foundation from which to launch into your authentic self, and that you both support each other on this elevation of your true nature.
And that's the ideal parent-child situation too. Yeah. I don't want to mix those relationships up too much, but I'm saying is an ideal situation is where a parent can acknowledge the pieces of, or the child's attempt to reclaim authenticity after being just immersed in attachment, or develop authenticity, or however you want to say it. And the parent says, oh, great, there's the authentic self emerging. Go, 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 go. Here's the support. Yes. Here's the thing. Attach to me because I'll help you grow this.
Right.
That's wonderful, but it doesn't happen all that much.
No.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
The idea is that the child separates when they're old enough at those teenage years and finds their thing, and that, the parent is supportive of it while still providing that foundation.
And then Prakriti remains intact as much as possible in life. Remember, the doshas are going to fall out of balance. Yeah. So we don't want to pretend that there's this perfect balance point that we could just hang out at our entire lives.
Yes.
But I think that the problem there is that when we push away in our adolescence, which might be very necessary, we carry that then into our adult life. And when we start to form adult relationships, we're pushing away subconsciously and unconsciously before we've ever given the other person the opportunity to support and uplift.
Right.
And it's our world, it becomes our worldview, which Victor loves to talk about. The worldview is, I must stay the individual and I must maintain some sense of detachment. I'm going to be financially responsible for myself because I don't want you to be able to pull any strings on me.
Right.
But that's already, you're going into a relationship already looking for the back door.
Yes.
How am I going to stay separate from you while I attach to you?
Right.
Okay, well, we're in duality big time.
Right.
You're not good luck.
Yeah.
And if that stays inside the subconscious, right? That's how that child becomes the parent that they were rebelling against.
Yes.
Because that pattern remains. They have a child, they're detached from the child, that child grows up, resents that, rebels, and the cycle continues.
Right.
So we find our fate on the road to avoid it.
Yeah, and you have a spouse who's constantly feeling, why are you disengaging me? That's the worst of all betrayals.
Right.
Yeah.
Why are you disengaging me right now?
Because that's who I am.
Yeah.
Right. It's
No,
like,
that's a defense mechanism. That you adopt.
And you know, if we're not a counselor, or if we're not do this for a living, you're just a normal person. You just walk outside going like, why is she treating me like I'm a stranger today all of a sudden?
Right. And this is where we need, this education on emotional well-being from an early age. Like, why can't we have classes like that in school?
Yeah. Because there's nobody to teach them.
Yeah.
I mean, if children learned these understanding others and their own emotional behaviors and how to have compassion and how to navigate through these in life, as well as getting all the other formal education, how wonderful would that be?
Well, you're never too old to learn.
Yeah,
So,
there you go.
we're always in school.
Exactly. So...
I'm certainly in school. That's what I'm saying. I'm literally taking a class with...
Right. And that's like curiosity, which I think is so important as we go through life. And it comes up again and again because curiosity is a way not to have the blame, the shame, the pushing down, the activating of your nervous system going to tamasic or rajasic state. So
dominance and control, favorite words in our culture today. Dominance and control, the Me Too movement, the whole thing. It's all about dominance and control. Why is somebody feeling need to dominate and control? Because I'm insecure and scared as hell.
Right.
And so why else would I dominate you? Nobody really wants to dominate another human being.
Yes.
Not if you're in your full authentic
Absolutely.
self.
Absolutely. You want to uplift them and have them reach their potential.
Exactly.
The ideal.
Exactly.
Fascinating. Another great conversation, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you so much.
Endless,
exactly. And like we said, we're all still learning this along the way. So it's fascinating. So tell us where people can find out more about you guys.
You're the man.
Okay, so you can find us quite easily, www.iiayurveda.com. That's International Institute of Ayurveda is the organization, or Center for Applied Consciousness, which is center4ac.com. And email us. It's very easy to get a hold of us. If you guys have been listening in the past, we've been offering, Joe's been offering numerology readings for free. All this is free. And I switched over. I was offering Prakriti readings, but I switched over to doing Jyotish, like 15-minute Jyotish hits on your purpose or authenticity or soul or whatever word we want to use for that. So please contact us for that and take advantage of that. And if you want to really delve into Ayurveda or this kind of and yogic wisdom and all this stuff, which is all of it's intertwined completely, take a look at our school. We certify Ayurvedic practitioners coming January 2022. We start our first 2-year course. And we have another course called Ayurveda for the Vagus Nerve and more. So check us out, and we're around to talk.
Great. And so the email again for the 15-minute Jyotish reading is a call with you, Victor, and then the numerology reading is by email with Joe.
Yeah, but it's
you email reception@iiayurveda.com.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you so much for a great conversation. I appreciate it. And until next time.
Yes. Goodbye, you guys. And
bye.
Be happy.
There you go. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Joe and Victor. Please check out all the links in the show notes for iiayurveda.com and for those generous offerings of a numerology reading and a Jyotish reading. If you think that this episode will be helpful to family or friends, please share it with them so we can get this wisdom out there. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you want to rate and review the podcast, I would really appreciate that. If you want to know more about my online services, my online consultations, at-home cleanses, and educational programs, just click on the link in the show notes or visit elementshealingandwellbeing.com. Thank you so much for listening. And until next time, take good care of yourself, be well, and bye for now. Slán go fóill.